Holy smokes, we are so back. To the loyal viewers who have come back to watch me once again, sorry I went on hiatus along with Togashi, life got busy, but I'm back. And with that said, let's jump right into this chapter because we got some crazy stuff to talk about. But I'm going to start off by just going over the chapter, and then at the end I'll give my deeper thoughts and such and whatnot. The chapter starts off at 11:45 a.m. on the 10th day of the voyage to the new continent, alright. We find ourselves in Kurapika's room where he's teaching a set of bodyguards about what Nen is, how to use it, and then also awakening Nen within them. The next person to step into the private room where Kurapika will presumably awaken their Nen and then do the water divination test is 5th Prince Tubeppa's bodyguard Longhi. As she walks into the room, Furikov thinks to himself that since he knows that she's a Nen user, will she pretend to have her Nen awakened by Kurapika, or will she be honest with him and reveal herself as a Nen user? He also has a thought that it would be nice if while she was in the room she killed Prince Wobble, which is more so wishful thinking than an actual hope or expectation. Longhi immediately comes out with the truth and explains that she is a Nen user, but makes it clear that she is not the assassin that has been in the room training with everyone. She then says that she'll show proof that she's not the assassin while also explaining why she's there. As Longhi activates her Nen ability, we learn that she is a manipulator and her ability is called Moonlit Decree. In short, her ability can bestow or limit the power of whoever signs her contract. However, when it comes to the current situation, it's a bit more complicated than that. The contract Longhi wants Kurapika to sign states that there will be essentially a peace treaty between the 8th Queen and Prince Wobble, and then the 2nd Queen and Prince Tubeppa, and then all their respective bodyguards. Neither party is to harm the other, and if Kurapika is to break his part of the contract, then he will be forced into Zetsu for 7 days, but we'll get more into that later. Just wanted to explain how her ability works. We also learn that the reason for this contract is not for Tubeppa's benefit, but for Longhi's, and she's only using the contract as insurance to help her reach her own goal. In other words, this contract is not supposed to help Prince Tubeppa, although it does. The main intention is for the contract to force/encourage Kurapika to help her. Kurapika then pulls out his judgment chain and a gun, which Longhi tells him is pointless considering she's a Nen user, but Kurapika does not care. But like I said, the contract is just so Longhi can achieve her own goal, but she says before she can explain exactly what her goal is, she needs to explain what she calls the original plan. We get an insane reveal, or at least insane to me, that this random bodyguard that we have known for a good bit of chapters is the daughter of Beyond Netero, making her Isaac Netero's granddaughter, and the fact that was just dropped the first chapter is insane. I love it, but insane. We learned that years ago, Beyond got very close to the Kakin Empire, and while that itself is not necessarily new information, we learned that Beyond was getting freaky in the sheets with various young and high-ranking women within the Kakin army. Those children that he had would then be raised by the mother and an adoptive father, and the children would then be sent into the Kakin military school. Longhi also explains that she believes that Beyond would do this every time a new prince was born, which means he was active. Anyway, Longhi continues to say how Beyond had awakened her Nen at birth, and because of this, she eased her way through military school and quickly became a bodyguard for one of the princes. She also goes on to explain about how she believed it was Beyond's plan for all of his children to ease through military school and then be assigned to a prince. However, Longhi emphasizes that this was just the original plan, or in other words, there was more to what Beyond had planned with his children. Longhi continues to share her past, which involves her not being aware of how important it was that she was Beyond's daughter. She also didn't know her true purpose and didn't even know that she had a lot of siblings, like a lot. But Longhee keeps explaining, and she says how she and her siblings had a much different upbringing and purpose than she first thought. She explains how at birth their Nen was awakened, and she adds this little information that if Nen is awakened in an infant, they develop Ten and Zetsu rapidly in order to protect themselves from both danger and fatigue. And I'll get more into that later, but the important part of that is that if a baby awakens Nen, they learn Nen very fast. Anyway, Longhee then makes it very clear that this awakening of Nen when they were babies was only a side effect of an attack from Beyond. She explains how Beyond had placed a Nen curse on all of his children, which simultaneously caused them to awaken Nen. And that alone, we'll get into it more, but this puts Beyond in contention for at least a top 15, if not top 10, worst anime/manga dad of all time. But back to the story. Longhee gets into explaining how after her half-sister Mahaka was passed over and was never assigned to a prince, she noticed that her parents were acting strangely, and as Longhee says, she began looking for answers. This led to Mahaka finding Longhee and discovering that they were siblings. Together, they then had what Longhee called a highly renowned Nen user inspect them, and they found that the curse Beyond had put on them was, and I quote, a terrifyingly dark Nen that activates after death. She then tells Kurapika and Bill to use Gyo to look into her mouth to see the curse. As she opens her mouth, what looks like a Junji Ito illustration comes out. I don't know what Togashi was on, but this art was crazy. And with no sort of body, just a mysterious and chill-inducing eye is seen. This is a very lazy descriptor, but it just looks evil. With that said, Kurapika and Bill didn't seem that concerned. At least not anywhere near as concerned as I was. But Longhee continues explaining the truth behind the curse given to her by her wonderful father. Love him. She says how the Nen user that inspected her and her sister described them as appetizing sacrifices. She also later uses the term unappetizing sacrifice, but I believe it was just meant in the sense of how powerful their Nen curse was, or it could also mean that the strength of the individual impacts how strong or weak the curse is, meaning that they were strong. Regardless, Longhee explains that including her and Mahaka, there are over 10 appetizing sacrifices and even more unappetizing sacrifices, meaning Longhee has at least 9 confirmed siblings with many more presumed to exist. So like, how freaky was Beyond getting? You know what? There are more important things at hand. She then gets into revealing what I believe to be the most important information about the Nen curse she and her siblings possess. She says that she, along with her siblings, were bred to assassinate a target, and that the Nen user that was assessing her and Mahaka said not only is there no way to remove the curse, but it was the strongest curse they had ever seen. And I will dive into that so much more later. But she continues on about how she and her siblings are all just living sacrifices, and that she doesn't know what the ability of the curse is or who her target is. But she does know that she and her siblings are all possessed to curse someone to death. And if I didn't make it clear, it is implied that each sibling has a different target. Bill quickly interjects and tells Kurapika that if they take too long, the other guards waiting outside will be suspicious that they're up to something, but Kurapika says he wants to finish hearing Longhee out. Longhee continues and explains how she and the other appetizing sacrifices have curses that likely target a prince. She emphasizes once again that she does not know who her target is, but she says it's clear that Beyond wants to put an end to the succession war. After hearing this very intense information drop, Bill looks at Kurapika and says that if Beyond has kept this to himself, he's either holding the trigger to activate the curse, or he's waiting for certain conditions conditions to be met to accumulate the required aura to then activate it. Kurapika agrees it's likely the second option, and Kurapika then goes into theorizing what Beyond's plan might be. He explains that because Beyond has inserted himself into the core of Kakin, he might be planning to help first Prince Benjamin take the throne by essentially killing off the other princes. However, Longhee disagrees. She then says something that gives us a core insight into the personality of Beyond. She says, and I quote, "We're talking about a cunning, cold-hearted, thorough man who has had ample time to prepare. It doesn't make sense to go to such lengths in order to support an easy target." With that, she just means that choosing to side with Prince Benjamin just because of his status and all of this extra stuff that he holds and can do, it's too simple-minded for Beyond and all of the planning he's done. She then drops the bombshell that she believes that one of the princes is Beyond Netero's child. This shocks everyone in the room, including me, and being the genius that he is, Kurapika was completely level-headed and immediately asked the queen, like, hey, who can participate in the succession war again? Because at the time of reading it, I was thinking back and I was like, don't you have to be a child of the king? Wrong. The 8th queen explains what the rules are to participate in the succession war, and she says that you only have to be a child of an official queen. You do not need to be related to the king. Some guards outside then knock on the door of the room asking if everything is okay, and Kurapika comes out and out of good faith reveals part of the truth. He says that he and Longhee are negotiating an alliance between them and Prince Tubepa. While this is happening, we see Furikov and he's analyzing Kurapika's aura, and he's confused by how calm it is and begins getting concerned about what Kurapika and Longhee are really up to. Meanwhile, Bobby Mina is looking with a slight look of concern and maybe hesitation. Kurapika goes back into the room and points the gun at Longhee once again and tells her to continue. Very polite, Kurapika. Longhee goes back to explaining the contract she wants Kurapika to sign, which once again is not for Prince Tubepa's benefit but for hers. She says how the contract is a truce between both Wobble and Tubepa's parties to not do harm to one another, and if Kurapika breaks his part of the deal, he will be forced into a state of Zetsu for 7 days. And I'm gonna add this now, it's never clarified if Tubepa can break the contract, but it can be inferred that if Tubepa breaks the contract, she will also be put in a state of Zetsu for 7 days. But that could be wrong. Maybe it's one-sided. I don't know yet. Kurapika acknowledges the danger of being stuck in Zetsu because in a succession war where you have very strong, powerful, intelligent, and experienced Nen users and some very mentally unstable Kakin princes with insane Nen beast and Nen abilities, being stuck in Zetsu might as well just be a death sentence. At that point, I would just off myself. That being said, Kurapika puts his smarty pants on and asks clarifying questions and asks Longhee for a more clear description of what is considered doing harm, because he doesn't want to get trapped in some weird wording with the contract. Remember, kids, if you sign a contract, always read it and get clarification. Longhee says only things that directly cause harm to the prince will break the contract, and then goes on to say that if Tubepa is killed by someone else, or if it comes down to just Wobble and Tubepa before Beyond's child is found, then not only will the contract essentially be void, but she will allow Kurapika to use her ability one time. But of course, all of this only matters if Tubepa also signs the contract. Also, I forgot to add this, but according to Longhee, part of her ability is she has to truthfully and fully explain how her ability works. So all of this should be taken as truth. Anyway, Kurapika thinks about how this all sounds like a really good deal. And he also says how his lie detector chain, or the judgment chain, hasn't budged, so Longhee at least believes everything she's saying. But then Longhee finally comes out with what she truly wants. In her own words, If it's confirmed one of the princes is Beyond's child, I want to eliminate them with my own hands. While we don't get an explanation for exactly why she wants to kill this sibling of hers, I believe it can be inferred that she wants to kill them out of spite because she and her other tens of siblings have all been made sacrifices just to potentially promote Beyond's favorite child to the King of Kakin. She monologues and says how if Beyond had been open and truthful about his intentions and plans, maybe she would have sided with him and never reached this resolve. We also get another look at Kurapika's judgment chain, implying that she really is telling the truth. Yes, she could have chosen a different path given the correct circumstances, but now her resolve to kill this potential royal sibling is unmatched. Kurapika and Longhee come out of the private room and everyone's looking at them. With the same way every previous person has walked out of the room with their aura activated, Longhee does the same thing to try to imply that she just learned Nen, to try to hide the fact that she's already a Nen user. However, Furikov is kinda shocked and confused. He's shocked that based off of how their aura feels, it seems like they really were just negotiating. But if that's all they were doing, he wonders why Longhee would be crying. But of course, we as the reader know why she was crying because we just saw her do a massive trauma dump. Anyway, Furikov thinks of different possibilities as to how maybe Longhee attacked Kurapika and Bill, but he just ends up coming to the conclusion that they're all way too hard to read, which I don't think shows any lack of skill on Furikov's part, and instead, I think it shows just how calm and collected and skilled Kurapika and Longhee are. Kurapika gives the group a half-truth version of what he and Longhee discussed, saying that they were negotiating an alliance, and Furikov says how he's not buying it, and Kurapika is just doing it to keep good relations with the other guards and other princes, which is true. Kurapika then brings in the next person to awaken their Nen, and Furikov gets to thinking essentially just about how Kurapika is maintaining a good balance of trust and is keeping his prince safe. He goes into how he can't really do anything to sabotage Kurapika as of now. Furikov then looks at Babimina and says he thinks it's time they switch shifts with other guards, but Babimina doesn't respond. Feeling a bit confused, Furikov asks Babimina if he's okay. Babimina looks slightly unsure but says it's nothing. We then get the first look at Beyond and forever, and he's still chained in his room and he looks a little rough. Beyond asks the Zodiac Kanzai if he can have a new book, to which he's told no, and that if he wants to do something, he can write his own book. Beyond asks for some pen and paper, but he's also denied that because of safety purposes. Apparently Beyond can turn anything into a weapon like Sakamoto or John Wick. But anyway, Kanzai asks if Beyond has any other requests, and Beyond says yes. There's someone he wants brought to him and he wants to speak to, and that ends this chapter. Now on to my favorite part, which is all of my thoughts. So starting with what I thought was the most interesting and exciting part of the chapter, which was all of the new information we learned about Beyond. Previously, I had thought of him and seen him as pretty much just a slightly more erratic and spontaneous version of his father. I thought whereas Isaac had a more spiritual connection to what power meant, Beyond had more so an iron fist in a sense, and while that's still partially true, the majority of what I thought about Beyond was thrown out the window this chapter. I now see Beyond as far more of a malicious character, considering how he was able to toss away the lives of literally tens of his children by making them sacrifices. And once again, this is not like 2 or 3 kids he's making sacrifices. We're talking 10, 20, 30, maybe 40 plus children that he made a sacrifice. And mind you, he made this decision when they were infants. And not to make too much of a joke of this, but I'm telling you, to sacrifice that many of your own children and to make that decision right away from when they were infants has to make Beyond a top 15, if not top 10 worst anime dad. But I'm personally saying he's pushing top 5. Anyway, back to serious talk. Not only do I see Beyond as far more malicious than I ever would have thought, I see him even more intelligent and even more well prepared than I could have ever thought. And I already thought his planning and intelligence was off the charts, because I previously thought the extent of his planning went no further than just getting himself to the Dark Continent, which was by no means a small feat. But now we've learned that he's done far more than that. He's created himself essentially an army of cursed Nen users who all possess a curse likely stronger than any other curse we've seen in this series, and if not the strongest, then close to it. But I personally say it will be the strongest, if we ever actually get to see it. Final point about Beyond before I get sidetracked. There's two more things I'd like to say. First is that considering what we know about Nen curses, it is extremely likely that this curse is tied to Beyond's Nen ability, although we can't say for sure yet. Second, it now makes far more sense why Periston, someone who is implied again and again to be very malicious and an ill-intent person, was chosen to be Beyond's second in command of his expedition crew. And while this is like a total shot in the dark, I just want to say, consider the possibility that maybe one of the reasons Jing wanted to take Periston's role as number 2 is because some way, somehow, he knew what Beyond has been planning, and as his number 2, not only does he hinder Periston like we knew he wanted to do, maybe he also wants to hinder Beyond. I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. But let's get back to this Nen curse. I do not think it should be taken lightly. Not that people are going to be like, oh, it's not a big deal, but I'm just saying, I'm serious when I say it will be the strongest Nen curse we've ever seen, with the exception with something Nanaka or one of the 5 special threats could do. But other than that, it will be the strongest Nen curse. Because mind you, Kurapika's chain can put on a very powerful curse. However, that can be removed. The Nen user Longhee and her sister met with said that there's nothing they could do about this curse. On top of that, it has been stated several times how evil and powerful this curse is, which should make it incredibly clear that if or when we see this curse activate, it will be a display of some of the strongest Nen we've ever seen, which I know I say that a lot with the current state of Hunter x Hunter, but that's just how things are in my opinion. With the current state of the arc, there are going to be lots of Nen users, Nen abilities, and now Nen curses that we'll be seeing that will be some of the strongest we've ever seen. But let's start talking more about Longhee and not just her curse. I really loved how she went from being a completely random character to a super important character. And I didn't just love the fact that she was revealed to be Beyond's daughter. I also love the situation she now provides the story. And on top of that, she provides what was a missing link between exactly how Kurapika and Tsurayunik could meet. Because at this point, it seems pretty clear that Tsurayunik will serve as Kurapika's final villain. Because now, if this alliance goes through, because Tubeppa has a temporary alliance with Tsurayunik, we now have a much more clear way on how Tsurayunik and Kurapika will cross paths. Also, I feel like it's worth saying, while it's true the spiders are on the Black Whale and Kurapika could be tempted to go after them if he learns about their presence, let's not forget Kurapika gave up hunting them for the sole purpose of reclaiming the eyes of his clan. And considering Tsurayunik is in possession of those last eyes, plus maybe the decapitated head of his childhood best friend, Kurapika is not going to choose the spiders over Tsurayunik. But let's get back to Longhee. I really like how, at least to me, it really felt like she was the child of Beyond Netero. To me, she showed a clear mind, thoughtful preparation, intelligence, and while it was not comparable to her father or grandfather, the strength of her aura just made it convincing that she is in fact Beyond's daughter. She had many similarities to both her father and grandfather despite being her own unique person. Finally, with Longhee, I don't think anything she said was a lie or that she plans to deceive or betray Kurapika. I think her plan is exactly as it was stated, and while there may be things that backfire or events that could cause her to act differently, as of now I feel like we can trust her. And speaking of who's trusting her, I'd like to talk a little bit about Kurapika. He didn't do anything super cool or crazy this chapter, I just loved to see him. I loved how calm and collected and intelligent and just awesome he's been this entire arc. He's had to deal with a lot of crazy stuff. He was put in the middle of a succession war between princes who have Nen beasts. He's had to deal with secret assassins. He's had to deal with maintaining politics. He's had to deal with a lot, and it's just been really cool to see him handle it so well. Also, when it comes to Longhee's deal, Like I said, I think she can be trusted. Kurapika even acknowledged that the deal she proposed was good. I just think that while he will end up agreeing, something about it is gonna backfire, or it's just gonna some way somehow put him in a very tough situation. But let's get on to the last few things that intrigued me. One is that I found Bobby Mina's behavior very interesting. Up to this point, he has been, for the most part, someone that could be seen as calm, collected, and intelligent. However, he had a slight behavior change as well as focus on him in very particular moments. The first time we see him in this chapter is when Kurapika comes out of the room to let everyone know that he and Longhee are negotiating. We see Bobby Mina looking intently at Kurapika. He's not saying or thinking anything, but with the speech bubble, it's almost as if he has something he wants to say, but can't or won't. I also believe his eyes show a hint of worry. The second time we see him is when Kurapika and Longhee come out of the room and Bobby Mina looks almost as if he was impatient or restless to get some kind of information of the exact details of the conversation Kurapika and Longhee had. But mind the difference in expression between him and Furikov. Furikov is someone who was also curious about what Kurapika and Longhee were up to, but notice that their expressions are different. The final appearance of Bobby Mina is as Longhee is walking away from the door. Furikov notices how she's crying and he ponders what happened in that room. Furikov then asks Bobby Mina if he's alright. Bobby Mina takes a moment to respond as if he has something else more important on his mind, but he ends up saying that he's okay. What I think may be happening is Baby Mina may be one of Beyond's children. I think this because of his concern. If he was just worried about the fact that Kurapika and Longhee were creating an alliance, he would have had a similar reaction to Furikov. He also would have been actually discussing various possibilities with Furikov, but he wasn't. He was silent. If we look back to when we first see Bobby Mina, I would argue that he could have put together that Kurapika wasn't telling the whole truth just like Furikov did. However, Bobby Mina could have been worried that his half-sister was actually sharing information about their family plan, or just the current state of their family. Then when we skip to when Kurapika and Longhee come out of the room and Bobby Mina looks at them as if he were restless or anticipating for them to come out of the room, he could have potentially been very worried about exactly what she was revealing about their family. Then finally, just as Furikov noticed that Longhee was crying, it's very likely that Bobby Mina noticed this too. So, when Furikov asked if Bobby Mina was okay and Bobby Mina goes silent, it could have been him realizing that his half-sister just revealed the entire truth behind their family. I could very easily be reading way too much into this, but I find it very interesting how Bobby Mina has been acting, and it's worth noting. Bill is also an interesting person to think about for this chapter. Some of you may have forgot, but Bill is technically part of Beyond's expedition team. With all this information being revealed and plans being made, it's possible that Bill will at some point find a way to report all of this back to Beyond, and it's also possible that he will try to hinder Kurapika and Longhee's plan. But while he is part of Beyond's team, at this stage of the story, I don't think he'd choose to betray Kurapika or Prince Wobble just for the sake of Beyond, unless Bill has some deeper connection to Beyond outside of money and the fact that he was hired. I've talked a lot about Beyond so far, but let's talk about his actual appearance in this chapter. There's nothing super notable about him in this chapter aside from him requesting to meet with someone. My assumption is that most people are going to think that he wants to meet with the prince that is actually his child. However, I'm thinking differently. Now that we have a whole new perspective to the degree in which Beyond has been planning all of this, I will now be proceeding with the assumption, even if it might be giving him a little too much credit, I will be proceeding with the assumption that anything that happens is pretty much part of Beyond's plan and or helps him one way or the other. In other words, I am positive that his plan, whatever it may be, is on autopilot and he does not need to actively do anything. Because of that, I don't think he'll have to meet with any of his children, none of his cursed children, and not the prince that may or may not be his child. I think he wants to meet with someone who can entertain him. Remember, he was asking about more books because he was bored. He wants someone to help him pass the time. He wants someone with a vast amount of stories, knowledge, and a fun personality for back and forth talk. And not that it's necessary, I think it would help if this person had enough physical power that Beyond respected it. So what if the person that Beyond wants to meet with is Jing? We haven't seen Jing once on the Black Whale, causing some people to even think he's not even on there. But considering he's part of Beyond's expedition team, and Jing himself wants to go to the Dark Continent, he's definitely on the Black Whale. And what a better way to finally reveal him on the boat than with a conversation with Beyond. Maybe I'm getting my hopes up, but that's how I'm thinking about this. And on to my final thought. One thing, as I was just looking back through the chapter, is I picked up on Queen Oto's reactions being interesting, I will say, which I often say. Now, granted, Queen Oto is always nervous. She is a defenseless woman in the middle of the Succession War, and throughout the entire arc, she's been freaking out. But I feel like this chapter, it's been a little different. She had several reactions, which I'd like to point out. The first one being when Longhee reveals that she is Netero's daughter. The next is the reaction she had when Longhee insisted that Beyond plans to ally with a prince other than Benjamin. Then the queen's reaction when Longhee reveals one of the princes may be Beyond's child, as well as how she acts when Kurapika asks to clarify who can enter the Succession War. Looking at her reactions through all these conversations makes me wonder, maybe Prince Wobble is Netero's son. Not only could it explain this slightly odd behavior from the queen, but it would also create a huge obstacle for Kurapika and create a very interesting conflict between him, Longhee, and potentially Prince Tubepa, or even Prince Saradnik. It's also worth thinking about how Longhee explained that accessing Nen in infancy allows you to very quickly learn some of the basics of Nen. It creates rapid Nen growth. So imagine how strong the child of Beyond Netero would be if that baby awakened Nen, was given a guardian Nen beast, grew up and grew in power during a succession war, and then maybe in the future grow up as a child on the Dark Continent. I know I'm getting carried away, but when I lay it out like that, it doesn't sound too far from something Beyond would want. If Beyond's goal was to create basically just the strongest Nen prodigy of all time, wouldn't raising a child with Nen in the Succession War ensure they win that Succession War and then presumably grow up fighting shit on the Dark Continent? Is that not the best way to create a Nen monster? Maybe. I could also be cuckoo and thinking way too much. I leave the judging up to you. So this is a post-edit note. So I got a little carried away with this point, even for me, but let me spin it this way to try to make myself sound a little less crazy. With a little more thought, I believe that what Beyond really wants is to essentially expand the human empire. This is something we essentially already know that he wants to do. However, he's been to the Dark Continent. He knows how dangerous it is. So what if he realized what he needs is to create a king that will take over this new empire for humans that will take place in the Dark Continent. And in order to create a king that's strong enough to lead the human race into the Dark Continent, what would that be? A Succession War Nen cursed baby. That's Prince Wobble. I promise I won't be wrong. Okay, back to the video. But those are my thoughts. Overall, that chapter gave me so much joy. Togashi's writing and art style just scratches a certain itch in my brain, and I just love reading his work. I don't know what it does, but I love it every time. I'll see you all next week, and for the love of God, stay safe, because apparently the Jujutsu Kaisen leakers are starting to leak Hunter x Hunter, and that's messed up. So stay safe, y'all.